Welcome to PlanStrongerTV. I'm your host, David Holland. Do you have kids or grandkids who are recent college graduates? What advice and support do you give them? What will be helpful and what may be counterproductive in the long run? Those are great questions for every parent and grandparent. I've invited certified financial planner Scharr-Bykowsky to join me on today's program to discuss these important subjects. Let's roll. Welcome back. Kids and money. It's an ongoing process that we teach kids about money and how to be responsible, and I'm right in the thick of it myself with 3 teenagers. So, I'm very glad to bring to the program Scharr-Bykowsky, certified financial planner, and visiting us from South Carolina.
That's right, Columbia, South Carolina.
All right, well, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here. Bring in the ringer. This is something you spend a lot of time focusing on.
Yes.
You've successfully helped a son graduate to independence?
I did it, yes. So this is something that's near and dear to my heart. We've just gone through this recently.
Wonderful.
And, you know, obviously it's something that can be very difficult nowadays. And it's different, I must say up front, it's different for every family and for every kid. So you have to find out what works for you.
All right. Well, that's good advice.
Yeah, the key thing is to make sure that you're eventually making sure that they get off the payroll of mom and dad.
Right.
And that you do that in a way that hopefully they're fully self-sufficient after college, if they have a decent job. But the key thing there is you want to set expectations, and not just right when they graduate. You want to work on this as they're entering college. And even before then, we always made it clear to our son, when you get out of college, you're getting a job and you are going to be on your own. And thankfully, that's what happened. But some kids go to graduate school,
Sure.
Some kids, you know, they're different situations.
There's different paths.
Different paths, but be sure to set the expectations, and those can change over time. You can tweak them, trial and error, but you want to make sure that you set a time limit and you establish, here's what I'm going to help you with, and here's what you're going to be responsible for.
Wonderful. Well, that is the focus of what I wanted for us to be able to talk about today is how to help that graduate go into the workforce,
Correct.
into their own life, and hopefully we've done a good job on the front end. Correct. Along the way with, you know, allowances and chores and teaching them about money.
Right.
What are some of the challenges, Laura, with the graduate? They've just graduated college, they're embarking on this big world full of opportunity. What are some of the big challenges you see for the graduate and for their parents?
Well, for the first time, they're really completely independent in most cases. And so the parent who's used to providing all this nurturing dollars and money and emotions and all that has to really take a role of stepping back. And the helicoptering parenting should be over by this point. You want to be able to be there as an advocate and a coach and a friend, but you really are trying to help them now make it on their own. And so that's the challenge, is how do you help facilitate that without being intrusive and providing too much help and support? Because if you provide too much and you can't afford it, that hurts you.
Sure.
And if you provide too much and then the kid gets spoiled, then they're not.
It hurts them.
It hurts them. So there's that fine line.
Well, it's hard to think about, but sometimes we got to fast forward and think that we will be, the parent, we will be older, and we will be in a position where we are then dependent maybe to some degree on them for doing exactly what we did for them.
Right, right. It's kind of a scary thought, really, when you think about it, but yeah,
well, but it's part of it. And so that there's that scenario where you want to see them emerge and then take on these responsibilities. And, you know, I think back in my own life with my parents and how they encouraged my independence, but also were there as a resource to step in and help me think through and figure out and make good decisions.
Right, right. And that's our role, really, at this stage. So, but it's overwhelming for them because they've never had a paycheck that now is permanent. They've never had to put together a budget. They've never had to navigate bills and you know, having a home or an apartment, and so that can be overwhelming for them. So we're there to kind of help guide them.
That's good. So let's use kind of an example. The ideal, and I know a lot of different situations are going to vary, and there's going to be things that haven't worked out well for whatever the situation may be. But let's take kind of an ideal that the son or daughter has graduated.
Yep.
They're interviewing. Let's start right there.
Yeah.
So do you help them get a place to live instead of coming back home? Do you support that? Do you try to maybe support them until they can get the job? Walk us through the process.
Well, I think if they have a decent enough earning potential getting out, hopefully you can tell that child, well, I'm expecting you to be self-sufficient, okay? At that point, help guide them with their job search such that they're hopefully looking for jobs in areas that are economically feasible to find housing in. So for example, my son went to school in Pennsylvania, but he was looking at jobs in New York as well as other areas of the country, and he was able to get one in Atlanta. And we encourage that because the cost of living, it's much cheaper in Atlanta. And guess what? The company they went to work for was gonna pay the same salary.
Oh, okay.
And so if they're gonna pay you the same salary, it makes sense to go in an office where you can find affordable rent. And so you help guide them in terms of finding an area that's affordable to live in. And then you help give them ideas in terms of, you might want to go with them to help, you might even help them with the first month's rent, for example, because they might not have a lot of cash.
That's reasonable.
We helped with a move, and if you can't afford that first month's rent, help them move, help them physically, and that's also tough. Being there to support them with that is a great help for children, but or young adults, I should say.
Sure.
But you also want to make sure that they try to find a roommate. At this stage, it's tough for people to make their rent affordable without a roommate.
All on their own.
So encourage that. And also, I use the rule of thumb of never exceed 20% of their gross income for their rent. And that is, otherwise they're not gonna be able to pay off their debt and or save. And I just don't wanna see a situation where you get out, you're on your own, but you're moving backwards.
And you'd like to see them saving really from the get-go, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, we're gonna talk about that. So.
Okay, well that's a key, and that brings me to the next question, Laura, is about budgeting. How much do you insert yourself into the process of budgeting when they first are graduating, getting that job, getting the apartment or whatever the situation is gonna be? How much do you help them tinker with that?
A lot. Okay, so, but here's the thing. This is the beautiful thing. It's only gonna take about 30 minutes to an hour, I promise, okay? You sit down with your child and you're gonna establish a budget. So they know now they've got the job and they know what their salary is gonna be. They've talked to HR, they know what their benefits are gonna be. So you sit them down, and literally this only takes about 30 minutes. Here's your pay. We're gonna take 10% off the top. That's gonna go into your 401k. So that establishes that habit right up at the very front that we are definitely going to be saving 10%. It's a habit, it's non-negotiable. Then you take whatever deductions they might have for their medical, but in general, they're gonna be fairly minimal. But you add those up, take that right off the top. Then what's left, you take about 15% there for a figure. Most kids are in the 15% tax bracket.
Probably.
So when you're done, that's gonna be about their take-home pay. And you're gonna divide that by 12, and you're gonna know what their monthly take-home pay is gonna be. Okay. Fairly easy exercise. Then you start with the expense side. So now you know what's coming in. Okay. Now let's talk about what's gonna be going out. Well, also pretty simple. So kids know what the fixed stuff is gonna be, the rent, their car payment if they have one, their student loan payment if they have one, their car insurance, which hopefully they're also paying at this point, their renter's insurance, their utilities to some extent. They're gonna know what those costs are gonna be, and you're gonna add all those up. Also very easy. Now we got to the little tougher part, which is gonna be those flexible kinds of, So, we financial planners call them discretionary expenses. That's right. They're kind of the things
it just came right out. I couldn't help it.
we have control over those, right? So we're going to have eating out, right? Vacation, gifts, hobbies, dating, those types of things.
You've got a budget for that.
You've got a budget for that. And that's when you start having this conversation, well, what are you spending now? Because remember, I always recommend that kids pay for their fun stuff themselves. Sure. So what are you spending now? And then what do you think you'll spend going forward now that you're out of the college environment, you're in an apartment, you're working? So you try to get, excuse me, a best guesstimate of that. And then you're gonna add that up. And so you have what's coming in, you know what's going out.
Yeah.
So in minus out is what they should be saving every month. And literally this takes about 30 minutes because, and you can help them with some of the categories, but they're gonna be pretty basic.
It's not going to be overly complicated because they're just starting out. They don't have all the obligations that we have as, you know, people that are further along in the process.
Correct. So at that point, you can have that be their target savings goal. And they can say, yeah, I think I can do that, or no, let me see if I can't go back and massage the numbers a little bit. I want to spend more. Now that I see I can possibly save this, I want to spend more on vacation. And that's where it's a give and take. You don't tell them what to spend. It's really about their life and their decisions. So, you know, my son, for example, he loves to fly planes. That's a hobby of his. We needed to make sure there was money in there for his hobby. And then you get to that target amount, and then you kind of step back and you give that to them, an Excel spreadsheet, back of the envelope. They can put it in the computer. They can use Mint, whatever they want to do. And then you touch base with them. And I would say give them about 3 or 4 months, because that's about when they start really, you always have lots of expenses those first few months.
Sure.
So after that, touch base with them and say, hey, by the way, do you think you're able to save that $300 a month or whatever it is?
Right.
Are you truly doing that? And they'll know. They'll see their bank account going up or down. Yes, I am. Or no, I don't know where. That's where you have to jump in and go, maybe, okay, let's talk about that.
So it's okay to come back to it and say, hey, look, let's talk about what this is, how much you're saving. Maybe they're finding that they're just, I keep running short. I don't know what's wrong. I don't have the savings that I thought we would have.
And that's where I would suggest a tool like Mint, for example, where that aggregates their expenses. And they can kind of look through and go, oh, wow, I didn't know I was spending that much on my hobby flying or eating out. Or, yeah, normally they know what it is. Generally, they'll know.
Well, to kind of keep track, and this is kind of a two-part question, what do you think of the idea of a credit card early when they've graduated and using that as a way to kind of keep track?
Yeah, so we started the credit card when he went into college, and we gave him a credit card, and it was meant for only emergencies because we were paying that, right?
Okay.
And he had his own credit card that he would put all the fun stuff on that he would pay for.
Okay.
Then when he graduated, we kind of said, you can keep it, but we're expecting that you're not going to be really using it anymore. And
again, real emergency.
Yeah, real emergency. But at that point, he had built up the credit to get his own credit card.
Oh.
And so, yeah, so I do like when parents, together you have the kid on that credit card, they're building up a credit history, and that helps them then get a credit card. And yes, they should have a credit card. And then, of course, you know, they might even have one for business. So they've got to keep those separate. That's the one thing. If they have one for business and one for personal, make sure they keep those separate. And sometimes, you know, adults, you know, who've been in the workforce a long time have a hard time doing that. But you need to kind of establish that habit up front.
How about taxes? How about their tax return? Getting them involved in that process, not just doing it for them?
That's a good point. I actually did my son's taxes with him side by side.
Yeah.
We got Quicken out, and we did it together. And so he could see how the process went, and he understood it. And once again, for a kid, it's fairly easy, those returns. And so, but I fully expect that he is going to be doing that, or if he wants to ask me or help, that's fine, but I want him to take that over. Once again, his finances, his responsibility, I'm here for questions or help. I think the more you tell your children or expect that, hey, you're kind of on your own, we're expecting that you're doing what you need to do, and we're here if you need help. That's the key thing, is really putting them in charge.
Well, and that's excellent. And the next point to that then, or the follow-up, is when is it the right time to step back in? When do you come in and say, look, we need to readdress this? In other words, how long do we let them struggle before we step in and say, okay, you've struggled long enough. This is no longer productive. You know, it's no longer a learning a lesson.
That's a good question. And I would say probably about a year, but it depends on how much they're struggling. Okay. You don't want them going into severe credit card debt, for example. But if they're having problems, and like I said, you should be checking in occasionally. Every 3 months, by the way, just as casual conversation, how we doing? Once again, I feel it's so important as families to discuss money. It's normally a taboo subject. People don't like to talk about money, but I think it's so important if it's done right. If it's done in a constructive fashion, if it's done
I think it needs to be done in person too.
Absolutely.
Because phone call, you know, you can't see what's going on. They could be really good at not letting you know if there's a problem.
Yep.
But in person, you can look them in the eyes. All three of my kids, I look them in the eye. I know if they're being straight with me.
Body language is
right?
important. I always say if you want to talk to your kid and have a deep conversation, you either go on a car ride together
Right.
or you eat a meal with them.
Right.
Because they're going to be sitting with you for a
They're
while.
captive.
They're captive. And sometimes you don't even have to say anything. They'll bring it up. So
Yeah.
that's my trick there. That's my parental trick.
I think it's important to encourage that consultation, that coaching relationship you can have with the child, that they don't view that you're trying to micromanage them.
Yeah, they have complete ownership. It's them 100%, and you really want to just be there to help. And the more that unfortunately, I've seen too many of my clients try to micromanage and say, we'll pay, 35-year-olds that are still on their parents' insurance, or whose parents are still paying for their health club, you know, membership, or, you know, it's just kind of silliness. No, there's going to be a fine line. It's about, I encourage time limits. So even if it's the kid who's in graduate school and they're like,
Right.
okay, I'm going to take out loans for this, but can I live with you? Yes, you absolutely can rent-free until graduate school's done, and then, you know, set a time limit
Right.
or a dollar limit so that it's not an open-ended thing. And they're okay with that. Kids just want to know where the boundaries are.
I think we all want to know where our boundaries are. And when we know the boundaries, it's like, okay, now I know what I'm dealing with or what I can work with. And I think that part of that conversation also has to be, and this is for the grandparents watching, you know, thinking about that graduate, they're graduating and the grandparent wants to do something to help, or they want to say, hey, I recognize your accomplishments.
Yep.
What do you say to the grandparents
Grandparent.
watching the program?
You know, be specific and once again limit it. So I'll pay for your first month's rent deposit because you might not have a lot of cash together for that. Or I've got some old furniture and I'm downsizing. I would love it if you could have these pieces in your new apartment. And I'll actually go and help you move.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing where you're involving yourself, and I'll take you out to, you and your roommate out to dinner. So doing something that is limited but helps them get themselves on their feet. And also rewarding. If the kid had a great did a great job in college and had straight A's, well, hey, you did really well.
Yeah.
Here's $5,000 graduation present. You know, I don't see anything wrong with that.
Just be clear, clear with the child. You know what, you'll love this. You know what my grandmother did? When I graduated college and I got my first job, I was an accountant, started my career as a CPA.
Love it.
Went to work for one of the big firms. I said, well, I'm gonna need suits. I've got to look the part.
What a great investment.
Okay. Well, I said, I need to get suits. She goes, I think that's a great idea. She goes, I'll loan you the money. So
I love your
borrowed
grandmother.
the money, and I have, at the time, I wrote her a check every single month, right out of my paycheck.
I love that story.
And then after she passed, of course, this has been many years, but after she passed, my dad gave me all the checks that she had made copies of, and I had that, and I have that as kind of a reminder that she helped me, but didn't help me in a way that was counterproductive. She did it in a way that
And you need to show that to your kids.
yeah.
That's great. And so that's the thing. If you can't afford to help monetarily, there are other ways to help. They're phenomenal. Emotional support, helping your kid move, loaning them money. You know, a lot of families can do the intra-family loans, and that can be a win-win because there are very low interest rates on those loans.
Sure.
And so you're getting an interest rate that's higher than the market interest, but your kid's getting an awfully good deal.
Still have to put a limit, still have to be crystal clear, right?
Absolutely, and there has to be a certain rate. You have to check, you know, the monthly rates and all, but once again, that can be a win-win as well if you can't truly afford to just give them the cash.
Good thoughts. Thank you, Laura. Excellent.
Thank you.
Laura Scharr-Bykowsky, our guest today, certified financial planner, joining us from Carolina, South Carolina, of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, it's time for the inside scoop. That's what I want to give you today, and this is a subject I know I've talked about on the program before, but it's so important. How do you get your spouse involved with your finances, your family's finances, and prepare them for the unexpected? I want to go deeper than just, hey, you need to be in the meeting with your advisor, or you need to know where the checkbook is. There are some real problems and challenges that people can run into if they aren't prepared and if they're not involved. Now, we've got to forget the stereotypes right off the bat here. What I'm going to talk about applies to men and women equally. Whatever the nature of your relationship is. If you're in a dependent or codependent relationship, married or not, none of that matters. If there's somebody else that is going to be affected by your death or your not being able to handle things, incompetence, okay, then they need to know what's going on and how to access the money and where it is and what to do. So when you don't know what to do and you're the survivor or you are the person taking care of the other person, okay, there's a big risk of making bad decisions, getting taken advantage of. You know, there are people who read the obituaries for one reason, and one reason only, to see if there's a way they can wiggle in or try to scam that person, one of the survivors, the spouse who has survived, scam them out of their money. So this is the brutal reality of the world we live in. So being prepared for what may come will help you address what you need to do if that day happens where you're on your own. The other challenge or problem is if you're not prepared, you may need to ask your family for help. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but a lot of people don't like imposing on their family, especially if they have their own lives and they live far away and they have their own responsibilities and their own work and all of those things. The other problem or challenge is that without preparation, bad decisions can be made, and that can end up wrecking your family legacy. And these are some serious problems that can emerge from not being prepared. Another one that is really scary for a lot of people, you might become dependent on your family. You know, you've raised them to be responsible, independent adults, and then if the proper planning is not done, you find yourself or your widow or widower in that position, becoming dependent on them. All of this can result in unnecessary fear, unnecessary stress, and unnecessary expense. So what are some of the essentials? What do you do? Number one, where is everything? Where's the money? Bank accounts, checkbooks, savings accounts. Is there a safety deposit box? Is there a safe in the house? What's the password? What's the code? Where are things? How do you access them? Who do you call? Who do you call? What's the broker's name, telephone number, the bank, all those details? What does a person need to do? And if they aren't able to do these things on their own, where do they get help? Who should they talk to? Now, most important of everything I've shared with you just now, you have to test it. And this is not fun. You have to kind of say, okay, you're going to do this now for a week, for 2 weeks, for a month. Test the ability of the other person, your spouse, your financial partner, to be able to conduct things and handle things. You know, we all assign responsibilities in our relationships for different parts of what needs to get done. I do certain things, my wife does certain things. Obviously, being a financial person, I'm more involved with our family's finances than she is, but she knows where everything is. She knows what she needs to do. Make sure that you feel confident that your spouse or financial partner knows what to do. I had a client not long ago who really didn't need my help, and this is an interesting story. They didn't really need my help. The husband had been a CD buyer for his whole life. He had a little book, and he kept all of the different bank accounts and where the money was and what the rate was. I remember it. I remember it like it was yesterday, that book. He had done CD buying for a long time. He didn't really need my help, but he came in, he and his wife came in and said, we'd like to become clients. And I said, okay, that's what I do. I'm here to help. He said, well, I'd like to take some of what I have, some of the CDs that are maturing, and have you help us. Now, looking back, I'm not sure that he really needed my help, but what he needed help with wasn't so much buying CDs or even putting the money into something for growth, but he wanted to create a relationship for his wife so that she would have a resource when he wasn't able to keep the little black book of CD accounts. So it's very important to take steps like that and to be responsible and smart about your family's financial planning and make sure you know what needs to be done. And if you do that, you know what I'm going to say, it'll help you plan stronger. Thanks for being with me today.
If you would like more information about the topics and our guests featured in this series, please visit our website at PlanStrongerTV.com. Also, if you have a question you would like David to answer, please send it to questions@PlanStrongerTV.com.